Um, we here have a great guest by the name of LylacDoll. I'd like Lilac to introduce herself to us, and where we will have the opportunity to ask her anything. Go ahead, Lilac. Hello.
Hello, so I am Lilac. I am an online adult content creator. I've been streaming on adult websites since 2017. I'm also a musician. I make music, I write music, I play covers of songs on Twitch. I also have a Patreon where I write original stuff and bring people along with the process of making it. And I make photos for OnlyFans and basically anything that I do that I can transform into something people can see or hear generally gets put on the internet.
Nice. Amazing, amazing. Um, we have already prepared a few questions from since this is an international server, the Calliopean Club, we have people from around the world. So people who cannot come here because of their time zones and shit have prepared to you. We have guild masters from our various guilds have prepared questions for you. And you guys who are watching on Twitch or Discord, if you have any questions, you can put them in the respective chats. Like Discord, it's the event text, and Twitch chat, it's just chat, bros. Like, don't be dumb. And yeah, let's start. First of all, how are you feeling? This is a question from me. I always ask this to anyone who I'm interviewing. How are you feeling, Lilac?
Fancy. I'm very curious about the questions, but I'm excited. So, yeah,
Nice,
I think we're good.
nice, amazing, amazing. Okay, so I have questions from the guild master of the social sciences guild in the Calliopean club. He has his name is Kishore. They've prepared a few questions for you. Um, the first question is, with the exponential increase in the adult content available online, there also comes the objectifying of women. That's their assertion. Do you think that this content can exist while avoiding the impact on the mentality of people in terms of objectification of women?
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't think that there's been an increase in the objectification of women if you look historically, because that's been around for a very, very long time. What we do have an increase of is there's more channels for women to be viewed, but there's also a lot more channels for women to put themselves out there and to make their own content. So I don't think that it's actually creating any more problems. I also I don't know that I agree with the assertion that by having content where women are viewed in a light where we are choosing to look desirable, that's in conflict with being viewed as a person or being objectified. Because I one thing I found is that in everybody that I have interacted with, the people who typically consume most of my content are the ones who are getting the most human connection from it, and that's what drives them to actually support the content.
Nice. Great. I have a question from the Discord chat by Based Dan. Extremely based. They ask you, what do you get when you combine a person with mental illness with a society that treats them like trash? And he has the Joker gif. I assume. Okay, so that's a Polish question. I don't
No, that
know.
sounds like the beginning of a joke. What do you get? I'm expecting
Damn, bro. Okay, based.
you get
Um,
what you fucking deserve. Wow, okay.
wow. Right.
I mean, I guess society gets what they deserve.
Damn, damn. You did me wrong, Daniel. No, sorry. Okay.
Not
Um,
base.
Lol Ruffle asks you, from what you have learned in your experience. This is from the Feminist Guild, by the way. I'm a user there. From what you have learned in your experience, studies in international studies and political science, what is one common misconception that people have about those subjects that you think needs to be addressed?
The biggest misconception is that generalizations are very useful tools. I think if there's anything I've learned is that trying to apply what you've learned about one type of government in one place doesn't mean that that's the only type of government, or that it's the only place that does it like that, or that you can just take that and copy and paste it anywhere else that you want to.
Mhm. Nice. A question from Ambo from the same feminist guild. She's the guild master of that guild. They're asking you about like what's your favorite thing about being a sex worker or like OnlyFans content creator. Mm-hmm.
I think what I like most about being a sex worker in particular, because there's a lot of ways to create content online and just, put it out there. What I like most about being a sex worker is that it flips a lot of the power imbalances on their head, because I think that anyone who grows up in a body that was assigned female at birth or is feminine presenting, I think you quickly realize that whether or not you present yourself one way or another, people are going to objectify you. People are going to view you in ways that you don't necessarily intend for them to view you. And so, at least with sex work, you can choose how you're being viewed and then direct and guide and manage that, really.
Huh? They ask you. Nice. They also have like two more questions about that. About like the sex work thing, because I am noticing that these questions are jumping from a subject to another. So I want to also like give you the leeway of thinking about the same things over and over. Um, so she asks you, would you recommend other people like to pursue being an OnlyFans creator or online sex worker? That's the first thing. And the second thing is if you have any advice for those looking to get started on OnlyFans or other adult sites. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the very first thing is very obvious, but it's do your research. If you want to do it, look at why do you want to do it and make sure that your expectations are in line with what you're going to get. Also, consider the potential costs that come with this. I mean, for example, I immediately had to rule out any jobs working with children because it can and will be used against you in a negative way in those fields. So just make sure you know what you want to do and why you're doing it. If you're wanting it to be a creative outlet where you get to make things that fall outside of the very limited sphere of safe for work content, because I feel oftentimes that it can be limiting to try to make something, but you show too much of one body part and now it's deemed, not something that you could ever put out on a safe for work platform. That can be really nice. If you're wanting something that's necessarily easy or quick money, that can be more difficult. Not saying it isn't there, but sometimes that can come at the cost of sustainability. But just do your research, know what you're getting into.
Uh-huh. Nice. Same. The same guild of the feminist guild, Bitey Frog asks you, um, how hard did you laugh during OnlyFans' brief madness, where they suddenly pulled the rug out from underneath the sex workers, who are its lifeblood, and the entire internet made fun of their short-sighted decision, and they were forced to bashfully pretend they never attempted it. I do not know what that is. Do you know anything about that? I don't know.
So
Go
yeah,
ahead.
so what they're talking about was, I think it was in October of 2021 or 2020. It's been feels like it's been forever and the years blur together. But basically, OnlyFans had a situation where payment processors like Mastercard, Visa were trying to force the site to either agree to a deal that they didn't like the terms of, something of that nature, and effectively was trying to strong arm them into removing adult content from the website. And all the details, whether or not it was just a bad deal or whether they were completely forced to remove content of adult nature from the website, that those are things that I'm not super privy to. But yeah, they alleged that come November 1st, they were going to kick off anyone who was hosting adult content, and there was a very short time frame for people to be able to delete the content that they already had put up there. Honestly, I laughed very hard, and you have to understand that this is not the first time, or was not the first time, that somebody had alleged that OnlyFans would be kicking adult creators off of their website. There's been a lot of uncertainty created by kind of vulturous journalism where sites would use it for clickbait to say, oh, OnlyFans is going to kick off sex workers, and then they'd get a lot of clicks. You'd find out that their source was some random anonymous person and that the journalist does not have any actual good standing or reputation, and everyone would panic and freak out. So really, it was interesting because I was one of the people that really tried to refrain from reacting to it until the words came directly from OnlyFans. And right up until the day before OnlyFans announced that they would be removing adult content, the day before that, they were sending private messages from the OnlyFans support account on Twitter to established models telling them that they would not do that. So it was very surprising. At this point, I was laughing whenever they said that they would go back on it, and I'm sort of almost at this point waiting for them to do something equally stupid in the near future. But I mean, I have no sources on that, so that's just me having a bit of apprehension about the platform since that, even though it's been a bit of time has passed.
Yeah, nice. Same person asks you if you no, I'm sorry. If what's been the hardest part for you of being a sex worker? Mm-hmm.
Uh, the hardest part has been, in terms of specifically creating sexual content, is trying to keep interest in sexual natures. I personally am not somebody who would ever be classified as hypersexual, and sometimes it can feel kind of monotonous, especially whenever I'm not getting the same things out of my content that other people would be. So that's kind of tricky, but I think that's very manageable and definitely a worthwhile trade-off.
Huh. Okay, amazing. Uh, Gemini from the Gaming Guild asks you, do you think that you will leave the industry at any point, and do you worry about it?
Think that I ever will, but that's also partially because of how I've set up my business and my foothold in the industry. I knew very quickly once I got started, I initially started with just webcamming. I knew that I could not sustain just, purely sexual content every day, all day, because like I said, it can kind of get monotonous for me. So, what I have is this kind of conglomeration of art and music and photography and sewing and all these projects that I do under the name LylacDoll. And at the end of the day, LylacDoll originated as a name that I took on for the explicit purpose of making sexual content. But now there's so much tied into it that I will always exist in the industry in some way, and I don't think I'll ever completely cut myself off from the option of making content that is explicit, because I never know like where inspiration will take me.
Huh? Nice. Gemini also asks, 1 second. God damn it. Okay. Oh, wait. Oh. Please mute yourselves if we're having some noises there. Okay. Do you ever, Gemini also asks from the Gaming Guild, do you ever find your work getting in the way of relationships of everyday life? Or no?
Oh, no, not really. Because what I have found is that there are very few people that I've met that have directly ever taken issue with my work. And then when it comes to relationships, typically one of the first things people might consider is jealousy or feeling like other people have access to you in a way that they would not like. And for some people, that is something that's very important to them, that you were the only person, or that they are the only person that gets to see you in a sexual nature. And for those people, I tend to not get into intimate relationships. And then for a lot of people, I think they're able to understand that it's separate and very different than the kind of intimate relationship that you would have with somebody who you are actually, involved with on a very personal level and not so much on a business performer level.
Nice. 1 second. I think Mad Laden had a few questions. If you want to chime in, you can do in voice, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Or
oh, whoops! My mic was muted.
Absolutely, go ahead.
I was trying to talk or whatnot. I was going to go back to the talk about OnlyFans, when OnlyFans had their little kerfluffle there. How much did that impact your desire to like try different things off of the platform, if that makes sense?
Yeah, So basically, I actually stopped making content for the platform because what they had said, I think the news broke in October. People had until November to get their content off of OnlyFans if it was adult content. And then I think that the payment agreement they were coming to was going to be enacted in December. I was very skeptical, very, very skeptical whenever they went back and said, no, 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 actually, we'll keep allowing adult content on our website. And I was pretty sure, I was pretty suspicious that they were going to kick adult content creators off of the platform as soon as the agreement went into effect, because what they also did whenever they went back and they backpedaled and they said, no, 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 we'll keep allowing sex workers to use our website, they also changed the terms of service to remove the requirement for them to forewarn. And they actually explicitly state in the terms of service that they don't have to warn content creators if they are going to change their terms of service. So at any point, they can just pull the rug out from underneath the content creators that rely on them for their income. So I was expecting to happen was that they would just do that on December 1st, and voila, they have had all of that time, that little limbo period between enacting the new payment agreement and their misstep with announcing it too early has now been funded by creators that kept supporting the platform right up until the very last minute. I am still not entirely pleased with them, but what I did find is during that time between December and November, I started looking at other platforms, and there just aren't other adult platforms that work as easily. They're not as user friendly. I know that there's a lot of complaints about OnlyFans, but trust me, I tried some of the other ones, and as a content creator, I was not pleased with them. So it is unfortunate, but there's a reason that they have such a strong foothold in the industry just from an ease of use standpoint.
Gotcha. So did that make you feel like you wanted to? So in terms of sex work, it made sense that you were kind of obligated to OnlyFans. But is this why you like started branching out into other like fields and things online?
Overall shift. So you have to understand that whenever this is going down with OnlyFans, MasterCard and other payment processors are having these same negotiations with almost every other adult website out there. And there are certain sites that have been around long enough that I have pretty good confidence that they will be around for the foreseeable future. But it meant that like the entire industry, it was basically a reflection of what was happening across all the sites where adult content is becoming increasingly regulated as more and more political, just, people who are involved in politics, either from elected officials or just really loud people who have loud opinions that are convinced that this is the thing they need to die on a hill about. It was a reflection of that actually gaining traction. And so, yeah, there was it made me definitely want to have options available to me that weren't tied to adult sites. So that is why I have Patreon and I have Twitch and I have, other different smaller side hustles.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a ton of sense. I also wanted to go back to when you were talking about your relationships, right? So you're saying that like if someone's connection to you is based on their access to your body versus like your personality, you're not necessarily attracted to them, or you're not necessarily interested in being in a relationship with them. Is this like some sort of are there stories that you'd be willing to share about how you've kind of come to this decision, or was this just something you kind of decided going into um, being an online sex worker?
I'm it's kind of weird. So I didn't really have a ton of grand plans about it. Going into it like, well, this will determine how my relationships go from here on out. Honestly, it's just been something that anyone that I have had serious interest in is somebody that has usually been open-minded enough about it. And honestly, like, I got my associates in political science. I started going to university for that about the same time that I started sex work, and I was fairly out to most of my classmates throughout most of that. And I think most people who are younger, they've grown up on the internet. They've seen everything. They've probably sent some risky photos themselves. So I think, at least for people that are in my age bracket, it's kind of odd or it'd be surprising for any of them to really have severe concerns about it. Because it just hasn't been my experience. And I'm sure the people that do have severe concerns about it, that is one of the perks of being pretty open about what I do, is that anybody who would have issue with it is already aware before they get too close, you know? So, like, nobody's hopes get up, nobody gets their hopes up, and then nobody's feelings are hurt. So I guess there's probably a lot of situations where maybe it could have been an issue, but people self-selected out of that pool before it ever became, you know, anything that was on my radar.
Right. Well, okay, so this is actually interesting because there is, like, you know, the group of individuals who can't self-select out necessarily, like family members. So, like, do you have family members that are aware, and, like, do you know how they found out? Like, have they told you that
Yeah.
they found out?
So, okay, so yeah, I've had family members that I've directly told just because you know, it came up in conversation. I'm like, oh, I've got to mail something, or no, I can't do that. I've got to work tonight. And it's just been very casual. I didn't make it into a thing, but also context, I was emancipated as a minor. So by the time that I was 17, I had already moved out and gotten emancipated just like 2 months after my 17th birthday. So I was very like disconnected from my family, and it's a lot easier to start sex work literally on your 18th birthday like I did, which was a choice that I made that I am very glad that I did. It's a lot easier to do that whenever you're living outside of their roof, several hours away. They're not part of your daily existence. And if anyone had problems with it, then it's kind of low on the laundry list of issues that they could take with me as a person. So it's kind of like not really an issue, though. If you do have strong family ties, good luck with that one.
Right. Yeah. No. I was watching some videos. So there was a YouTube video series like Ask a Porn Star. And they were, like, you know, asking these sorts of questions, right? Like, what's it like when your family has found out? How they find out? And, like, so this is actually really interesting because I think I don't think anybody actually talked about being emancipated and then starting sex work. Usually, it's like, oh, I had to, you know, really hope that my parents were okay with it, so on and so forth. So I guess, like, the interesting thing is, like, you've interacted with your parents since then, I'm assuming, right? Or on some level, or is this like a thing that they're you don't necessarily talk to them about?
Yeah, no, I mean, we're on like that, what is it called? Like the holidays, and that's about it. Kind of schedule. Like if I see you in public around other family members, but no, I don't have much contact with my parents.
Ah, okay. Okay. Well, fair enough. Sure. And then I had another question that was it was definitely based off of what you were telling young about your advice that you're going to give young folks. So I just want to make sure I can remember this, like what they should do when they're going to the industry, like doing some research and stuff like that. And I was I guess, like, my question would be, what kind of resources did you discover in particular, like, that were particularly helpful for you after you got started? Like, let's say, like, 1 year, 2 years in, like, you just kind of found out, oh, I wish I knew this when I was, like, getting started on the in the process.
I can't think of anything that I found out like 1 year, 2 years after I got started because there is so much information out there. There is so much. There are forums, there's wikis, there is, you know, and a lot of the stuff that's on campsites, you can watch other people's shows. So really, if you're finding things out a year or two later, aside from just, you know, figuring out the nuances of things that you'd already read about, you probably didn't do enough research before you got started. Just to put it bluntly, like there's so much out there that is not kept secret, and that's actually been something I've run into. Is because I was doing this and I was pretty out while I was getting my associates. I was going to a community college. There's lots of people that were, you know, in need of money and they wanted work, and they're like, "Hey, Lilac, how did you get started in this?" And I would start sending them like, "Hey, this is a good forum. This is a really good resource for information. Look at these things. Let me know if you have questions." And a lot of times they would never get back to me because it was kind of like they were expecting me to do like an MLM setup for them. Like, oh yeah, here, just buy the starter kit and, you know, I'll get you set up. But yeah, there really wasn't anything like that. I think you just get better at navigating the relationships and like the interactions you'll have with people as you go along. But there, aside from tools, it's a very I don't want to say it's a stagnant field because there's always new things that you as a creative person can do with it. but those are usually you generating ideas on your own. When it comes to tools of the trade, I mean, at the end of the day, you are selling the idea that people find you attractive, and that is a pretty straightforward endeavor.
Right. So actually, this actually brings me to another question. Then, actually, so you've talked about people that are have interacted with you in public, or people that you know personally, and then folks who have interacted with you at work. What do you do to maintain these relationships? Like, you've got people that interact with you in multiple ways. How do you keep the one world from bleeding into the other world? Like, what do you do about that?
So so most people don't like to bring up their online porn habits in real life. And those that do are usually people that I can speak very candidly with and tell them, you know what, let's not do this. For those that I knew in real life that I know have consumed my content, yeah, it was kind of one of those, it was actually kind of funny. So I was friends with a few guys in my college days, which are unfortunately put on pause at the moment with COVID, but I'll be going back eventually. Anyway, so it was kind of this thing where I knew that a lot of them had seen my content and perhaps potentially interacted with it because, you know, you all have usernames. I don't go digging. I don't try to like sniff out like, ooh, is this somebody that I know? Like, I just don't go looking for that information. But even amongst like that group, it was sort of an expectation that if anyone independently found my content, that was okay, but people amongst the group wouldn't give out my username, for example, to the other people that they knew, which was kind of amusing. So, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. But yeah, in terms of it bleeding over, for people that I know in real life, they definitely have a tendency towards self-moderating. And I think, you know, porn on the internet has been around long enough that people understand the etiquette, and no one's made me have to spell that out to them. For people that I know on, like, just as LylacDoll and not in my real life, those relationships are also pretty easily segmented away and never, you know, have the opportunity of becoming something that I know in real life.
Cool. I think we have a question, Valency, that you
Yeah.
wanted to ask.
I think Humanity, my favorite Albanian here, wanted to ask you about the what do you call it? About like what is the income you can see from the work as like the sex work and OnlyFans, and if you are living like feebly, comfortably, or like good with it, and how is it? How has it been economically speaking for you? Mm-hmm.
Few angles on this one. So first of all, I'd
Mm-hmm.
say I live comfortably. So compared to 22-year-old college student peers of mine who have associates in political science and aren't working in that field, I live very comfortably, especially whenever I take into account the hours that I put in. I technically work far fewer hours than a lot of people that I know. And a lot of the hours that I work are playing music on Twitch and making art and literally making things that I would want to make anyway. So when you wrap all that up into, you know, what a salary would be, it's definitely nice. The other angle you have there is sex work has basically been paid with hazard pay. You know, that's why it's been a well-paying profession for a lot of people. As the hazard of doing sex work goes down, as the stigma goes down, more people enter the field, it becomes more saturated, the rates go down. There are a lot of people who used to be able to make six figures that were just doing cam shows and that was it, that now don't make six figures anymore. And that's just kind of the way that it goes. I think that there's lots of potential to make just buku bucks, depending on what you do. You know, that's kind of, I take a lot of trade-offs monetarily to do things that I find interesting, but there are a lot of models, especially ones who really lean into paying attention to what market demands are and taking a very strong business-like approach to it, that do really well. And it's also, I think, something that gets brought up pretty often is the difference between active versus passive income. So making content that you can sell later, I would say creators that make a lot of content that they can just keep reselling will typically do better because that compounds. the third angle on this is that sex work is one of the few fields that if you say you're working in it, then people immediately want to know what you're making. And it's not just in the like, oh, I'm curious, that seems interesting. But for some people, not all, but for some people, it's because they need the justification of, well, sex work is assumed to be bad. And so if you're doing it, there has to be a reason. And that reason has to be that you're earning more money than a lot of people. And that isn't always the case. So yeah.
I see. I see.
Interesting.
Yeah, especially this gives me like you gave me two things that I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned the market demands, which as a debate bro and shit makes me wonder like where are you sit in the political map? And the second question, since you mentioned like the first angle being about artistry and stuff like that, and since I'm an artist myself, I wonder how can you start making that something monetarily. Um, I live in a third world country, so it's extremely hard for me so far. But I wonder, since this is like there's an online space there, how do you go about it? So yeah, go for it.
First one first. So the political kind of compass. I would say I am always learning, and I am very, very skeptical of anything that it supports the status quo. I would say I'm probably, by some people's standards, socialist. I think I'm pretty okay with. I haven't read a lot of the literature, which is why I'm not just outward like, this is my label. But I think I could very easily be called a socialist. I believe that there are certain things, like there's a base standard of living that everybody is entitled to, so people should not go without food, clothing, or shelter, and I don't care what bad actors might be doing to justify not giving people what they need. I'm not going to make bad policy based on just people that are abusing it. And then on artistry, I mean, there's so many different ways, and that's part of, I feel like I took kind of what you could, quote unquote, and I say this mostly joking, the cheating route, because it is really difficult to break and establish yourself as an artist. Like, there's so many people doing it, and sex work was a very easy and quick way for me to find people that I could create genuine connections with who would want to support my work because it's me, because I know that the quality of my work objectively, I don't feel like I am a particularly talented artist, but I do think that I could find people who say, oh, LylacDoll, I like her, I want to invest in the potential here, and go from there. So I kind of feel like I got the easy path in. You at the end of the day, you have to find people that are there for you and what you could make, not necessarily what you have made already, and that's very difficult.
Nice. For me, since you said this about your like political compass, I already can say assuredly that you are more based than half of the lefty streamers that we have right now on Twitch. And for the second thing, yeah, that's true. That's true. At least she's honest when she hasn't read the read papers, which is fine, which is amazing. That's like what we need right now. Nice. I just want to go ahead.
No, I just wanted to actually piggyback off of the art question real quick. Okay, so you're talking about the fact that you've got like folks who are already interested in your work, but I mean, honestly, from what I've heard of your work, I think it's excellent, right? Like, so you do art, you also do music, and I love your songs. I think they're fantastic. I'm really looking forward to you putting out your music. I think you're working on like an album, right? This was like the plan. I actually don't know what your musical plans are. Is I guess what I'm asking about.
The musical plan. So I think I'm in a state of very impactful growth. I'm running out of words, but yeah, just I'm in a state of immense growth as an artist because I had a lot of emotions and conflicting feelings and baggage about just how to approach creativity and songmaking and getting other people involved in that process that I am just recently overcoming. So the idea is, yes, eventually an album, although I do have plans to release probably singles before then, just because it's so much easier than releasing an entire album, and I don't want to wait that long to put more music out there. So, yeah.
So they're gonna be singles, and do you already know which songs you're gonna have out like the soonest?
I do have one. So the track that'll be coming out in the most immediate future is a track called "In on the Joke." It's a very like sappy track about realizing that you're way more attracted to women than you ever thought, and everyone else probably knew it before you did. But that one will be coming out soon. I've got drums are recorded by somebody better at drums than I am, which is just awesome. I am so glad that is something I have access to, that I can just get on the internet and be like, hey, somebody hundreds of miles away record drums for this because I'm horrible at drums, and then it can happen. So I just have some finishing touches to do on that one, and then In on the Joke will be coming out hopefully by the end of March. That is the goal.
Awesome. And
Nice.
then you've also had work on Spotify already, right?
Yes, I do have Spotify. It is under the same name, LylacDoll, and I've got 2 originals up there, and then a pretty dodgy home recording of a cover of Marina and the Diamonds' "Purge the Poison." So
That
Oh,
was
sweet.
amazing. I don't know. I was saying I really like listening to that rendition. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So you've done you've gotten quite far in terms of music, and then I also know from your streams that you've been working on like actual like art in terms of drawing and coloring and whatnot. Did you have plans for that as well? Like, what are you hoping to achieve in that realm?
okay, so my only plans in visual art are to make things that I like to make. I have a lot of. So basically, I was raised by a classically trained oil painter as a mother. And so I had a lot of expectations about art has to be in perspective with perfect shading, and otherwise it's useless in cartoons, or for, you can't draw those. And so basically, in the middle of 2020, I had this, just, I don't know what it was. I just went through a phase of just being like, I want to be able to draw things, like to think of something and to be able to draw it, and I don't care if it looks good. I just want to be able to get it out on paper. And so I've just been riding that high since then. And so I did a lot of practice, and now I'm at a point where I can make the things that I want to make 50% of the time, which is way better than it was. And that in itself like is rewarding, even though it's not necessarily like, ooh, a business pursuit.
Ah, yeah, that makes sense. So I wanted to go back to politics just a little bit more because we're just talking about what your politics are. And for those of you who are not aware, Lilac, you've been kind of going into the political spaces a little bit more than you used to. What are you hoping to learn from your experiences on like in politics in this Twitch space?
Oh, that's a great question. So, I think what I would like to learn is, I think it's probably like got to do a lot with debate and what debates are most effective, not just for the person that I would be directly debating against, but for whoever is watching, and trying to keep a finger on the pulse for telling where people's emotions are towards certain topics, and being able to be more plugged in with what even just a microcosm of what just the general public consciousness is, because I think it's really easy for me to get wrapped up in my own bubble and kind of lose sight of the outside world.
Huh?
Right. That makes sense. So like
Yeah.
you're hoping to kind of get an idea of like where people are, like not necessarily globally, but like at least within the Twitch politics space. Like just kind of have a good idea of like how what the like maybe not necessarily like what the politics are of this space, but like maybe
Right.
like kind of an idea of the philosophy that people have when deciding what their politics are. Is that
Well, and
more?
also like how, yeah, how people come to the decisions that they come to broadly. What is the determining factor 9 times out of 10 on a lot of different issues? I think that's a question I want to see decided, because I've went through a lot of personal political change, just from being raised by people that were very conservative and only being exposed to that, and eventually, picking up different bits of information over time. And I know that there were points where my mind definitely changed, and there are concrete pivoting points. But I wasn't paying enough attention as that was happening to really know what the straw that broke the camel's back was on a lot of things. And so I'm curious if I can observe that in other people maybe I can have a better understanding of how to recreate that. And honestly, like once you start going down this path, it starts to get a little bit creepy with social engineering and how much can we position people to do things the way that we want them to. But it is a genuine curiosity that I have no desires to use in any kind of evil or malicious way.
Huh.
Sure.
Uh,
What was that? Oh, do you have a? Go ahead.
Yes,
Sorry.
I do want to shamelessly plug our server for being one of the best, hands down, good faith debate servers that exist online. Okay, but seriously though, that's actually like very nice of you to mention, especially like you mentioning the fact that hey, you want like to push it, like find a plug on where emotions are and lie down the actual correct arguments, etc. I think that's like extremely important. Especially, I do not find it as much. So in the Twitch politics space, more in the Discord one, to be honest. Um, Ambo is asking you in Discord. Is your sex work online a creative endeavor, or is it mainly a way to make money? Do you view it as art or no? Mm-hmm.
Very to how visual artists who work in design firms or advertising firms view art, where you're very invested in art and you have the pieces that to you have meaning. But then at the same time, part of it is just showing up. And there have been, I especially feel like the most artistic things that I get to do are photo sets because you get to pick out the composition, the lighting, the costuming. It's very fun. I think those are the ones I enjoy making the most. And that feels like art, but most of those start strictly from, all right, I've got to show up. I need to make something today, and if I'm lucky, I'll make something that I really like. And then there are other parts of it where it's like, yep, I showed up, and that is a picture of my body. That fulfills its requirements. Moving on.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to go back a little bit towards when you were talking about like the straw that like broke the camel's back, and you were talking about how like you weren't necessarily reflective when you were changing your mind about your politics. And I actually would, I actually have questions about your sex work after this, actually, because your response actually gave me a few other questions. But going back to the politics thing for a second, do you have like a memory, like just something that was like of particular note to you that caused you to kind of embrace this sort of notion of learning how different the world actually is from your lens, I guess? Like, did you have like a moment where you were just like, oh, I need to start learning a lot of things because I don't think I know what I need to know?
Yeah, I think that for me, a galvanizing point was whenever I was 16 and I was trying to figure out how to navigate a situation where I was a minor, and so in America, like we have some really archaic rules based usually at the state level for how minors are allowed to conduct their lives. So for example, we create the situation where we aren't super certain on court precedent whether or not constitutional rights, like the right to own property, apply to minors. And because we're not certain, we don't actually have to respond to the damage that those kinds of situations can create. So, for example, if somebody can't own anything, I think that at the very least, the state should make sure that the person has the things that they need if they're not legally capable of holding those things, like shelter, food, clothing. Um, and so I was 16, I was in a situation where I didn't have shelter. My, access to things that I needed was very limited and sparse and difficult to anticipate when I would have, money for clothing or, be given the opportunity to buy notebooks or whether I would have school books for the next year because I was also homeschooled. And in trying to navigate that, I really kind of came to the conclusion that an emancipation, which would ultimately let me enter into contracts as if I were the age of majority, was going to be necessary for me to continue existing. So, through that, you have to look at the statutes, you have to see if they apply to you, you have to go through this whole process, and you have to know what laws you're up against. Laws like if you run away, who is required to return you to your parents and under what circumstances? All circumstances, and even if there's justifiable reason, that's not necessarily supported by the law. So that experience directly having my ability to take care of myself hindered by laws that were there supposedly for my own protection, but were in effect having the opposite result, was the first place where I really started to critically examine how laws were made, what their purposes were they always just, and, you know, every philosophical thought that comes after that.
Wow. Yeah. That's actually really profound. Okay. So back to sex work. You were talking, you've brought this up a few times now, like when you're just not in the mood and you're still having to perform, et cetera, et cetera. And for live shows, I can definitely conceptualize where the problem would be. But then you were talking about how this impacts your like long-term creations, like the pictures or what have you. How do you get through the barrier, I guess? Like, so if you're not really inspired to perform, but you're trying to create like media that is lasting, like what is your like, do you have a process for exploring that? Or do you just like throw stuff at walls and just see what sticks? Like, what's your...
I think it's really, really very similar to every other person who works as a professional in a creative field. You steal. Like, you go and you look at what other people have done. You say, how do I change this? How do I, you know, not just totally rip somebody off, but you look for other ideas and then you just show up and you don't expect to make something grand. You don't try to make the next Mona Lisa of porn. You don't, you know, have any expectation aside from showing up and doing the work and seeing what happens. And I would say most often I wind up surprised and I make things and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good. Like, I think that even though there's a lot of porn that exists in the world, I'm glad that this exists now, and I think that people are better off for it. And, you know, maybe this won't be a bestseller on clip sites because I don't do enough marketing for that, because I'm just like ADHD, I hate doing the tedious stuff. But, you know, I think for whoever finds it, they'll enjoy it and they'll be glad to have found it, and that's really all I can ask.
Oh, that's awesome. So then, okay. All right, so that answer is actually completely different from what I was expecting, to be honest. So now I'm really curious. What do you do then when you're live? Is it, I mean, obviously it's different. You can't like steal ideas or borrow ideas or what have you. So like,
I mean,
what are you doing to make it work?
oh, I mean, with that, I have a little bit of background in interacting with improv actors, and you know, there is definitely a way that you build a character that is sustaining, that is a baseline. And I will, you know, be very candid and say my character is very in line with me in real life, just ramped up to 11, and in a world where nobody else gets to tell me no. That's basically, if you put me in a situation where there is very few consequences for my actions, nobody can tell me no, and I am the most important thing there. That's LylacDoll on cam. So that makes it very easy. And for like sexual performance, I feel like as a you know, somebody with a body that was assigned female at birth, you don't have the same kind of pressures. You know, it's not like, I have a lot of sympathy for people that were assigned male at birth and people who have penises, because those things are finicky in this field. Whereas, you know, it's not very, you know, if we want to get into the nitty-gritty of sex work, it's not really that much of a problem. Like, it's very, very simple. And I've actually like had people ask me, they're like, so does that impact your performance? I'm like, well, you're always performing. You're always performing to some extent in a campsite space. So it's okay to perform a little bit more or less than other times.
That's so interesting.
Keeping it as Twitch friendly as possible, but you know, questions are going to be asked.
Yeah, of course. Answer. Thank you. Of course. This actually, like what you said about like performing, like sexual performing. It actually, like, you can, like, about originality also. You can literally say that for music too, no? Greatest artists like Bach, for example, literally stole like music papers from others and like performed them as his and shit like that. So, and it's not like he performed them their way, of course, and shit, like he recreated the thing. So yeah, that's art for you, which is good. Like, that's nice. I also wanted to like ask you a question about like repercussions of the sex work. Coming from the Middle East myself, I am like new to, let's say, to the liberal world and shit like that. I wonder, like, and this is a question that's like been brought up a lot by, and like an argument that's, since you like debate, and an argument that's been brought up a lot by, like a lot of who come from my countries and shit like that. Uh, like, what do you feel about like having kids, and do you think that your like line of work, of course, if you're comfortable answering that, if do you think that the line of work that you do would like impact the decision and stuff like that? What do you think about that? How do you feel? Mm-hmm.
May not be the best person to ask that because I've known that I do not want kids for a long time. But there
Mm-hmm.
are a lot of people in the space who do have children or had children after they got into it. And from what I understand, a lot of times at a certain point, once their children get access to the internet or being more unsupervised, I know that a few have taken the approach of saying, "Hey, so, I work in this field. It's not that big of a deal, but just so you know, don't be surprised. Don't go looking. Don't be surprised." And I personally have never heard of anybody having a lot of problems there. The only thing is in divorce proceedings, it can be tricky because one parent will allege the other parent is unfit because they've done sex work of any kind.
Ah, so legally it's I first, like, the first thing that you gave me is totally understandable, but like, damn, like legally people would use that as an excuse to for custody. Um nice. Thank you. What did I want to say? That is a like a good insight. You mentioned like not wanting to have kids. I see the sentiment a lot in the West, and like and the people who I talk to online. Uh, if you don't mind, like, to ask you why do you think that's like something that you do not want to or anything? Here, people like my country, everyone here is like they can't wait. You know what I mean? But yeah, I wonder like how is it for the other side? Why this like antinatalist, or not even antinatalist? I do not know like your position on that. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think there's like a few elements. So on the first bit, I really do not like the idea of pregnancy. Like that entire thing, just I'm like, oop. And then with adoption, so I kind of spent a lot of my teen years, like 14, 15, going, okay, like I'm sure that because everybody else that I know wants kids and everybody talks about that maternal instinct that kicks in, like I'm gonna want kids eventually, but it just hasn't happened yet. So I'm just gonna keep waiting and like, hoping that eventually I'm one of the people that wants to have kids. Because I grew up in a very conservative area where it was very much
Yeah.
expected that you were probably going to get pregnant sometime 18, 19, married, probably, that kind of thing. And so I expected to want to have kids. And I remember that was a year where I was spending a lot of time volunteering at like church camps and nannying a lot and just seeing how many children like weren't actually being taken care of. And I'm like, these are kids that are still with their families, they're not in foster care, and they're not even having like a good time. So it has to be that much worse for children that are in foster care. So I was like, okay, well, if I want kids, I'm going to go for adopting kids so that I can like I just felt like I personally, because I at that point didn't have like that strong desire to have my own kids, I couldn't really justify having kids of my own, and I'd probably want to adopt. Um but since then it's just I don't know if it's like anti-natalist. Like I don't really have like a really strong aversion, oh I hate kids, that kind of stuff. It's more just I feel like there's so many things that I prioritize, and because my interests change so much, and I don't have that really like innate maternal instinct, I would worry too much that I would lose interest in my child. And that's horrible. Like, and once you have children, you can't say that because then you're suddenly a horrible parent. And honestly, there was a book by, I think the author's name is Ashley Audrain. It's called The Push. It's about having a child and not getting along with them. And there's nothing wrong with the child as far as the author's aware for a lot of the child's childhood that they're involved.
Uh-huh.
But it's just, it can be kind of like a psychological horror. You have responsibility and obligation to somebody for 18 years, and they're full person. You don't get to choose what kind of person they become, and that's scary. Like that's terrifying, and you're tied to that forever. And so I think for me it's just there's so much finality in it that it's when you don't have like that biological urge, then every cognitive reason makes it out to be a very unwise bet.
Damn. Okay. Really good answer. Also, like Ambo said in chat, like not having them or kids doesn't need a reason. It's just the baseline. I think that's also a fair way, let's say, um, for people to like think about that question. Of course.
Oh,
Mhm.
100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah, I feel like I can understand that. Well, I have a different opinion on it. Of course, like I can understand where it is coming from. Amazing. Just a reminder for people on Twitch or people on Discord, if you have any questions of any sort, um, to us, please. Feel free to ask, of course. Let me bring up the list. I had a few ones more. I just don't want to ask questions that you've already answered. لحظة, 1 second. Yeah. Social science Guildmaster Kishore asks you about yeah, it's about drugs. I don't know how much is it prevalent among OnlyFans content creators, but drugs use is a great problem in adult performers and other parts of the industries. Although there are some reasons that are generally stated, but from your personal experience and your interactions with other creators, what do you think that is the trajectory or factors leading to all of this? Do you think that there are some ways to make improvements on this? What do you think? Mm-hmm.
Drug use, I've heard about a lot of it. In my adult content creation, I have not worked with other adult creators, so I've kind of been in my own bubble for that. But from what I've read, it seems like you can break up the industry into like porn studios, people that are like in states that, you know, they've got major studios, they've got filming, and you're doing contract work and that kind of stuff. And then you have independent creators, then you have strip clubs, and then you have like cam models, and then OnlyFans. And I think each of these segments has their own particular type of drug use. I would say OnlyFans because it's the part of the industry where people are the most disparate. It's just independent individuals making sexual content that you're really just going to have a pretty normal distribution of drug use to non-drug use as you would with the general population. With camming, especially on sites like My Free Cams, for example, where there's the monthly token competition, and some people get very invested in that. People will use certain stimulants to keep themselves awake longer, and I think you'll see like similar things with any kind of competitive event, even on Twitch. I'm sure there's probably, I haven't researched it, but I'm sure there's probably people talking about gamers using different drugs. And that's really just baseline energy levels. Also, you're trying to keep up usually a happy, upbeat persona. Usually that's easier to do with stimulants. I personally don't have experience with that, so I can't really say too much. And then also, I know that in strip clubs, I've heard a lot about anytime that I've said, oh, you know, I think I hypothetically would really enjoy stripping. There's a lot of aspects that appeal to me about it. But everybody that I've talked to that's had, you know, any kind of contact with it has always been very strong to warn me of the potential, you know, just it seems like there's just a lot of drug use. And I think that that partially just stems from it's a club environment. People are there to party, and it's probably easier to connect with people that are already, you know, if you have customers that are already coming in and might be using something, then if you're also using something, maybe that might make it easier, and also just the general energy levels that you might want to sustain. But I don't know if there's anything that I would say could be done, like speaking just from my experience as a very independent content creator that hasn't used drugs. I don't know that I'm qualified to make any recommendations about how to help that.
Nice. I seem it's a halal question. It was a halal question though about drugs. Okay. Based. Um, based. Dan asks you. He's our joker. He's asked you for a hot take. Communal child raising or dual parent system. What do you think?
Very, because I know this is like meant to be a shit post, but I have very complex feelings about how to raise children because it depends on like, are we raising them in America? Are we raising them somewhere with good social safety nets that extend to children? Like, what is the baseline that we have established? Because in
Ah,
America, I think our hyper individualism is definitely like harms children, and then you get into like some of the cult stuff, which I was homeschooled and I definitely knew people that maybe could have been perceived as having been in a cult. So it's like it was like that kind of fringe element of like it's not really a cult, but people are definitely isolated and teaching their kids weird stuff. So
ah.
yeah.
Clarify that was not a shitpost. Usually he shitpost, but he broke character
Oh,
that time.
sorry.
So it's fine. No, no,
Sorry.
but based answer though, based answer. Because yeah, it really depends, no? Um, I'm against both, alright? So yeah. You shouldn't raise your children, alright? They should just go in the wild and teach themselves. Hell yeah, based. Madeleine. Uh, yeah, yeah. Sorry.
So
Sorry.
it's fine. I'm hilarious, I know. Okay. So I guess like the next question, I'm not sure if we have anything else lined up, but was there anything that you thought would be like really interesting to talk about that we haven't like asked you questions about?
I mean,
Was there
like
anything like, oh,
I,
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I was just gonna say I can think of lots of things, but nothing immediately comes to mind.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I mean, like, I wasn't sure if there's like, so like you were preparing for this AMA and you were like thinking a little bit about like what types of questions could be asked, I guess. So I was just wondering if like the questions you were asked kind of like fit into your expectations, or were there things that you're surprised weren't brought up necessarily, things like that.
No, I don't think I had any surprises, and I saw the questions that like I'd been sent as like, hey, here's how people are generally responding, kind of the general vibe, and so that gave me, I think, a pretty good idea. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I was surprised didn't get brought up. One thing I actually am kind of surprised didn't get brought up is something that I've talked to with friends in real life that are aware of like all my creative stuff online is something that they've asked me about is like the vulnerability aspect where they're like you put out so much creative stuff, and I know for like a lot of other people it can usually be nerve-wracking to like write songs on a live stream or to post art that you've made that you don't feel the most confident in. But yeah, that was, I guess, the only surprise.
Ah, cool. So we had I guess this is a good chance for us to like talk about what you're promoting. So you've got your Twitch stream, which is LylacDoll.
Yeah,
We've got your Instagram, which is, I feel like I know how to say this word, chamomile clutter.
you got it.
And then we have a song coming out soon. And it's gonna be on. It was on Spotify or SoundCloud. I forgot where you said this was gonna go.
It will be on Spotify.
Okay, and this is, and they could find you on Spotify by searching for Lilac Doll as well.
Yes.
Cool. So I think that covers those things. And then I guess for Calliopean Club business, Valency, did you have anything you wanted to
Absolutely.
say about what we've got coming up? Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Based. First of all, go check her socials. I posted a few of them. Go check her. Give her some love. Okay, and respect. And yeah. Do we have anything? No, to be honest, that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have one more thing we can
Go for it.
talk about. Our previous AMA involved Tech Jess from Activision Blizzard. Her new show, the weekly stand-up, is happening starting tomorrow. So at
Cool.
4 p.m. EST. You guys can all check it out. It's weekly stand-up, all one word, on Twitch. So if you guys wanted to see what that was all about and where things are headed, it's all right there.
Yeah. Also, this has been recorded and we will upload it on YouTube. Hopefully today or tomorrow. So if you guys missed a few anything about it, you can like always check it out and everything. All right. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming, Lilac.
Yeah,
We
thank
really
you.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you
It's
so much
awesome.
for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. A pleasure, a pleasure. All right. Uh-huh. I'll see you around, people. Also, before actually I leave, Madlad mentioned to me that you are someone who follows Eris and shit like that. I was wondering, like, how did you know about her? What do you like about her and stuff like that? Since I work for our madam. Uh-huh. Eris
Hey,
from
I have
Aristocracy. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually found out about Aristocracy and Calliopean Club from Mad Lad, and he's like, hey, there's this really cool Discord, and you need to check it out. And I was like, okay. And then I looked into it, I'm like, okay, this is actually pretty cool and awesome. So, yeah.
Hell yeah. Based. Amazing. Hell yeah. Nice. Alright. I'll see you around, people. Make sure to follow Lilac and everything. Okay, حبايبي? Yeah, I'll see you around. Nice.